Good day, everyone. We're talking once again with the policy director for Governor Leon Guerrero, Mr. Carlo Branch. Carlo, thank you very much for talking with us again today.
Thank you, Nestor. Always a pleasure.
Okay, so as we know, the governor had made an announcement regarding basically, I think it's a mandated social isolation. Can you explain why she made this decision?
Sure. So I think we do realize that the governor very recently strongly suggested that we institute policies of social distancing to attempt to curb the spread of COVID-19 on Guam. And so, in progression of that effort, and to make sure that we could enforce it in the strongest way possible, while still allowing some semblance of people to go on about their daily lives, the governor has issued a recent executive order further defining those policies and giving the strength that we all need to be able to enforce them at a legal level.
Yeah, I know the governor has sort of so far rejected or resisted calls by the likes of the Guam Medical Association, Dr. Shea, to impose a what they're calling a complete shutdown of the borders and then a full quarantine. Um, is this somewhat of a version of that?
I think it's everybody trying to get to the same goal in the quickest way possible while still allowing society to move forward. So just before I got on video chat with you, I received a phone call from a gentleman who said that he was notified by a freight carrier, a mail forwarder, that he would not be able to have basic access to medical equipment that he ordered because a plane that carries mail regularly, I can't use the carrier's name, decided they would no longer be flying to Guam. And so I think part of the challenge when we want to make a gut check reaction that says, let's close off all the borders, is that we don't fully comprehend all the unintended consequences. For instance, this gentleman who may not be able to get the medical equipment he needs. I do think that there is strong logic behind restricting people in congregate spaces. That is, spaces where people are intended to come together in theaters, in sports gyms, in restaurants, except for drive-through and takeout. There is strong logic and strong science that says limiting use of those for a temporary period is one of the strongest things that we can do to combat the spread of COVID.
Now, there were a lot of businesses that were exempted from this. Can you take us through the analysis process or the thought process for deciding which businesses would be included and which would not?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is that we know that there are a number of businesses who still need some clarity on whether or not they are included or excluded in this expanded policy. The first thing that we'll say is that during the governor's address, she will announce a number that anyone can call to get further guidance on how this policy will affect them particularly. The second thing relative to the logic is that we do know that some states and some cities and some countries have been more successful than others in attempting to stop the upward tick of COVID. And so in attempting to figure out the policy that would work best for Guam, people at ADLUP, in combination with other experts who the governor will announce when her address comes out, consulted with each other to figure out the policy that would work best. And so the basic rationale was this: what is an essential service for society to keep running? And that is access to grocers, access to pharmacies, access to those who would supply grocers, like wholesalers and distributors. People will still need to be they will still need to be housed in their homes, so they will need access to hardware stores so they can fix a toilet or fix a jammed door. And so the biggest guidance that we have seen is not that you have to ban all movement. It's not that you have to take the cars off the streets or stop someone from walking up and down their neighborhood. It is to restrict large gatherings or groupings of people in small spaces. So takeout is still fine. Drive-throughs are still fine. And restaurants that operate in that manner can continue to do so. You can still go to the grocer. But the primary directive, I think, is exercise proper standards of social distancing, and we'll all get through this.
Yeah. I also noticed that in her executive order, the effective dates are from March 10th through the 20th. Why just these 10 days?
What she wanted to do was butt it up to the dates required by the original executive order. So she very clearly had said that we were exercising this authority for a period of 14 days and that we would reassess depending on where we were at that time. So this latest executive order clarifies and expands the original authority granted in the one previous, and so it terminates on or about the same time.
But at this point, it's still not certain whether GovGuam will go back into full operation on the 30th, or you still need to reassess that.
Sure, I think it's clearly subject to reassessment because our primary goal in suspending customer-facing operations was to limit to the greatest degree possible large group social interaction, and more importantly, to allow our public health services time to investigate the cases which were growing, attempt to cast a net around those who had close contact, and get them treatment get them tested if they exhibited symptoms of COVID-19. So it was that 14-day investigatory period which the governor felt was necessary, and that is why government operations were temporarily suspended.
Now, this comes on the heels of the announcement yesterday that we now have 8 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Did that weigh heavily into the governor's decision?
I think every time we find out that one more of our brothers and sisters, one more of our neighbors has COVID-19, that affects everyone, not just the governor and lieutenant governor, but everybody on island. And so obviously the governor, by her original executive order, banned gatherings of individuals, 50 people or greater, strongly emphasized the need for social distancing. And I think that this executive order escalates that policy and expands it, but it will allow for our greatest chance at attempting to curb the potential for a sharp increase in cases related to COVID-19.
Yeah. Now, the governor has also resisted the call for shutting down the airport, basically stopping all the inbound flights. Today was the first day, I believe, that you began taking passengers off planes and sequestering them, if you will, or isolating them in different quarantine places, mostly the hotels. How has that worked out so far?
I mean, obviously, anytime that you take an extraordinary action like that, you are separating people from their families. You are doing it with the strength of the law, and you are doing it because that harm that you are causing that small population is in an attempt to prevent a greater harm. So in an attempt to protect those passengers themselves and their families, the governor took that extraordinary step. And Nestor, while some people have called for a complete repudiation of all flights to Guam, I think the governor has made 2 things clear. Number one, she does not have the legal authority relatively to the FAA to do it. And number 2, even if that was done, there will be the potential for significant unintended consequences. For instance, the old man who called me, who is at himself a risk for COVID-19, who needs medical equipment ordered and can't get it because this particular carrier will not fly to Guam as a result of what is going on around the world. And so the governor, in attempting to use the power that she does have, ordered this extraordinary step of quarantining those individuals from a country that seems to have been a place where many of our COVID-19 victims have emanated from or traveled through.
Now, we spoke with one gentleman this morning on the radio who was a little bit upset because he did not know about this when he arrived. Does there need to be more information? Maybe even the air carrier can make those announcements on the phone, on the
Sure.
plane rather. Sorry.
First, I want to say I think the gentleman is absolutely right to be upset. And I think anyone in his position would be upset. But I want to give some context to why this decision was made. Yesterday, we all woke up to the news that President Duterte was giving international tourists 72 hours to leave Manila, and if not, they would be stuck there. And so, what that forced to Guam was a large influx of returning residents and maybe even visitors who would be at our airport without the necessary documentation proving that they were COVID-19 free. And so while that presented great logistical challenges for us, and we had to move quickly, more quickly than we wanted, it was necessary to protect the public. And so I do know that yesterday afternoon, prior to the flights arriving, both of the major carriers issued text blast messages to each of their passengers. I do know that prior to arrival, certain officials were attempted to be contacted in order to relay those messages. We did not make that decision lightly, nor did we make it without recognition of the time constraint. But when the president of a nation says all foreign travelers get out within 72 hours, we know the pressure that that would put on Guam's airport and on our ability to properly screen those passengers. So that is why we acted the way we did.
Okay, and finally, because I know you're very busy right now, can you respond to the president, rather, very quickly today signed part 2 of the economic recovery plan, so there's billions of dollars that will be available nationwide. Can you tell us what the administration has been doing to make sure that Guam gets its fair share of that?
Sure. I can tell you absolutely that everyone from BBMR to DOA to the Guam Economic Development Authority to all of our sister agencies are all working together to make our way through those various pieces of legislation, most especially the Department of Labor, to identify pots of money, grants, or direct aid that can help two groups of people specifically: individuals who have lost their job as a result of our need to fight COVID-19, whether it was because of the tourism impact or as a result of these new mitigation procedures. And then I think direct aid most specifically to those businesses who could not have seen this coming. And so my understanding is that this is the second in line of 3 particular packages. I think the one that has been getting the most attention has been the debate between Democrats and Republicans about whether or not there should be a $2,000 direct check every month to individuals, or whether or not there should be $1,000 twice over the next 45 days from Republicans. I think people recognize here that any little bit will help, most especially if the best ways to combat this virus on a local and national scale are policies of self-isolation and social distancing.
All right. Hey, thank you so much, Carlo. Appreciate the time again.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. There you have it. That's Carlo Branch, the policy director for the governor of Guam, talking to us a little bit about the governor's announcement today that she will call for mandatory social isolation effective at noon on Friday. For Guam's News Network, I'm Nestor LeConte reporting.